call the MPC meeting to order. Please excuse me, I didn't know my license plate number. Make more than one trip to my car, so. Okay.
Ask how many people do know their license.
Yeah, how many people do know your license plate number?
One.
Just from earlier.
Oh. Yeah, right.
So the first thing we're going to do is go around and do introductions, and we'll start this.
Alan Zelenka, City of Eugene. Mary Venus was with a cold yesterday, so I don't know if she's going to be here.
Sid Lykin, Lane County Board.
Pat Farr, Board of County Commissioners.
Tim Elsey, Lane County Public Works.
Ethan Nelson, City of Eugene, and for City Manager John Reese. And if there's a quorum that's needed, you can just call in.
Okay.
Patty Giannoni, Coburg City Council.
Petra Sheets, City of Coburg.
Paul Thompson, LCOG.
Brenda Wilson, LCOG.
Granny Brindle, ODOT.
Bill Johnston, ODOT.
Aurora Jackson, LTD.
Gary Gillespie, Lane Transit District Number 5.
Kate Reed, Lane Transit District Number 7. Hannah Parks, Alcog Manor Recorder.
Gino Grimaldi, City of Springfield.
Hillary Wiley, City of Springfield.
Christine Lundberg, City of Springfield. Okay, so we have our same packed agenda from last month, which hopefully, am I the only one? Nope, looks like somebody else brought their entire. Of course, then again, it is electronic.
Meets the.
I got my
Yes. So the first thing is to approve the April 6, 2017 meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second?
I have a correction.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. I mean, not sorry, I have a correction, but sorry I didn't get in there sooner. But on page 8, which is the ODOT update, this is why I know it's a correction. I mentioned in the second paragraph, and it was my misstating something. I said that the city of Springfield ODOT had provided safety enforcement grants to enforce pedestrian safety in the Eugene Springfield communities. I was corrected afterwards that it's more of a pedestrian education. So they'll be, working with pedestrians that might not be complying and educating them about safe pedestrian crossings and stopping for pedestrians. So it's more of an educational than enforcement.
Okay.
That's all.
All right. So with that correction, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? All right. Next item is any adjustments or announcements from MPC members? Yes.
Madam Chair, you'd like to add an additional agenda item, consideration of a letter to the governor regarding the upcoming vacancy on the OTC.
Okay. Right. All right. And where did you want to put that?
You could put that under updates.
On the follow-ups?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Anything else? Did you have an update also?
No, more of an announcement, if I could.
Oh, announcement. Okay.
Just a brief announcement. This is the last meeting of one of your members, the ex officio member from Coburg, is having her last meeting today at MPC in that capacity. So I just want to let you know that this is her last time at MPC in that capacity, and there'll be a new person from Coburg serving in that role.
Oh.
We'll miss you.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
And I would like to say that Coburg's loss is our gain.
Yes, it is.
And
Oh, way to
proudly
go.
happy to say that Petra will be our Assistant Public Works Director.
Oh, very good. Congratulations.
Does that mean we won't be seeing you, Tim?
Yes, well, congratulations.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, any other announcements or adjustments? Okay. Next on the agenda is comments from the audience, and I don't see any cards. Oh, or not cards, but.
There are 4 people that signed up to speak.
No.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I have 4 speakers under business from the audience. The first speaker is Donald Norden.
Good morning, members of the committee. If you don't, I'm Donald Norden. I live at 346 Elk Drive, just outside of Cottage Grove. I'm also a member of the Lane Transit District Board, although I'm speaking as a citizen, not representing the board or its organization. Was aware of reading your minutes from last meeting that the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Advisory Committee was grappling with how to disperse the funds that they had, and because of the excellent work of our Lane County staff, Paul, Brenda, I'm sure others that I'm not aware of, we have this over $7 million coming to the Central Lane MTO. And I suggest a way to apply those funds would be to install solar collectors on the Lane Transit District administration buildings. This would give us enough power to run these 5 electric buses that are coming into our system soon as they get fitted and delivered. And we would be able to make a showing of mitigating the air, showing the air quality and improving our conditions in this community. Our board has been discussing this for off and on about 3 years. We've had presentations from Advanced Energy Systems and staff analysis, and staff have gone and visited other transit districts who are running on solar power. And we may be a couple months away from being shovel ready, so we could actually take this money as it was available from the CMAQ committee. It could be applied in our community. It could be multiplied within Oregon and our local community. And we would be a little more resilient if we had a Cascadian subduction event. I'm sure we've all discussed in other committees. But what would happen if our grid became unstable or our energy supply is interrupted? At least we would have a big battery system that may be more valuable in that regard. And we'd be making a statement to our other citizens, the next generation of citizens, that we're trying to do something to mitigate the carbon emitted from our current transportation systems. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Shane McCrone.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the MPC. Thanks for your time and your important work on these issues. My name is Shane McRhodes. I live at 250 East 36th Avenue in Eugene. Most of you know me as the Safe Routes to School coordinator for 4J, but I have passed that torch on to Sarah Mazie, and I'm now a full-time dad, and so I'm here today to talk to you just as a citizen. Excuse my attire, I'm actually driving to the dump, so I do drive sometimes, appropriate transportations, and large loads to the dump is one of them.
I can make an analogy there.
So, as I said, today I want to talk to you as a father of 3 kids. As I walk, bike, bus, and even sometimes drive around town with my kiddos, I'm more and more frustrated by our priorities and the progress we're making on safe streets for all users. I've worked for over a decade to try and make incremental improvements within the system, but I feel now that I'm outside of the system and not doing the daily work, I feel more and more frustration that my fellow parents and friends feel when we say we just want to be able to get where we're going walking and biking and let our kids do that, but we're just not able to. So I think we're doing an injustice to everyone by dragging our feet and accepting these incremental changes. I say that as an advocate and someone who has worked in the field. Time and time again, we're still prioritizing fast and easy driving. And now we have a city where kids, the elderly, and many citizens are denied the basic right of mobility. So I have a proposal for you today. In 2021, we'll be welcoming the world to our region by hosting the Track and Field World Championships. It also happens to be the year my daughter turns 12 and my sons turn 11. By that age, they should be able to walk, bike, and bus by themselves all over the city. I can tell you that right now we don't have a transportation system. that a 12-year-old can safely, comfortably move about our city, even though they should be able to. I challenge you to prioritize funding, focused time, and dedicate the resources to creating a transportation system that's equitable, fair, and safe for our children and our world guests. Let's build separated bikeways, fill in sidewalk gaps, create safer crossings, increase enforcement of dangerous traffic behaviors by motorists, increase our educational and outreach efforts, and show the world that our city is one that values transportation choices for everyone. Let's use a 12-year-old in 2021 as the indicator species to see if we have gotten where we need to go to create comfortable and safe transportation environment for everyone. Please work to give my children, their classmates, the parents who are mostly too busy to come to speak at these meetings, and the thousands of citizens in our community who are afraid to choose healthy, active transportation, making it an easier choice by dedicating more resources to these important priorities.
Thank you. The next speaker is Teresa Brand.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to speak at the encouragement of Aurora Jackson. So my name is Teresa Brand. I'm the Regional Transportation Options Manager at Point to Point, and I'm here just to make a few announcements somewhat related to what Shane talked about, where we are running a number of encouragement and education activities this month for Bike Month. There's been a couple proclamations in City of Eugene and City of Springfield proclaiming that May is Bike Month. Just to let you know, on Wednesday, May 10th, next Wednesday, our Regional Safe Routes to Schools program is fully supporting the Walk and Roll to School Day. We do anticipate, we have 27 schools that are signed up, but we do anticipate a few more. We have delivered a large bag of safety gear for all the champions to help with encouragement out on the school grounds. And we think we'll have a very successful another Walk and Roll to School Day. Some of the schools do all activities all month, but there should be a big focus next Wednesday. So we invite you to go to your local school and kind of see the action, maybe help with walking some of the kids to school. We also, a little bit later in the month, are preparing for the Business Commute Challenge, which is a business-to-business challenge to use transportation options during that week, maybe try a different way to get to work. Right now, as of about 5 minutes ago, we had 216 teams, 1,785 participants signed up. Last year, we had 276 teams with about 2,700 people, and we're shooting for 3,000. Whole bunch of people in the next week sign up. Got a little late bloomers. That's okay. But things are on track. We think it's going to be very successful. We do have different events that highlight different modes, such as transit or walking, biking, etc., throughout the week, and we think it's going to be great fun. And all the regional partners are participating. We've got Wheels by the Willamette. We've got Breakfast at the Bridges that City of Eugene does. We have a number of activities. We have walkabouts in Springfield and in Eugene, and so we encourage you as employees in the region, if you are employed in the region, to participate in those activities for your team. So if you can beat other teams, or just as an individual to win different incentive prizes. So thank you very much, and thank you for your support of transportation options in the region, and we'll see you out there.
And I bet you're thrilled that the weather is finally looking like you for sure won't have rain. Okay, so the last speaker is Rob Zenko.
Good morning, Chair Lundberg, members of MPC. I'm Rob Zenko, Executive Director of Better Eugene Springfield Transportation. And we're really excited that representatives of the Oregon Department of Transportation and Transportation Safety Division are here today to talk about safety. As you know, and as I'm sure they'll report, recently ODOT adopted a new updated Transportation Safety Action Plan for the state. And there's a lot of good ideas in there, but I just want to read you their vision because I think this is great. Vision. Oregon envisions no deaths or life-changing injuries on Oregon's transportation system by 2035, period. That's great. That said, looking at the document, and this is a policy plan, and so it's sort of a longer-term sort of policy plan. There's a lot of great ideas in there. As we look at it, we sort of ask, show us the money. Show us what this actually means for our community. How is this going to make things different going forward from what they were before? So as you have your discussion today, whatever that's about, we encourage you to find out how ODOT can help our community be safer for everyone. And we look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's everyone that had signed up to speak. So moving on to our first item, it's our Safety Division report, and I have Troy Costalis and Nicole Carlson, or Charlson. Yes? One person?
Go right here. Yep.
Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair. My name is Troy Costalis. I'm the administrator for the Safety Division for the Oregon Department of Transportation, and I appreciate the tee-up from the public comment. I do have a short slideshow I'd like to present to you, but 3 parts to the conversation I'd like to share, and I appreciate the invitation to be here and everybody taking their lunch hour to do the important work for Central Lane and the communities that you represent. One was to show the link to Lane County from the Safety Division and the programs that we have and some of the programs that have changed because of the adoption in October of the statewide safety action plan. Second, share with you a little bit about what the current data across the state looks like from a fatality point of view, because a lot of attention this last couple of years because of the increase in fatalities after a few record years and things going in the correct way, turned around and went the wrong way. Share with you what we are experiencing as a state so far through the first quarter of this year. And then to try and answer some of the questions that were raised and a couple comments that came my way before being with you today around the safety action plan, but also then for my division, what we do for implementation of safety programs. At your yes, okay. At your spot around the table, there is a copy of the slides themselves. If you wanted to grab those and potentially follow, if you want to take notes, or more than happy to take questions along the way. You have to change your password every 45 days.
There we go.
Remember which one you used last. Right? So is that, if we're working on the technology part, I'll jump to the back side of the conversation, and then we'll come back to the front, so that you make good use of your time. I want to say thank you and congratulations on adopting your safety action plan. That is a great step, a bold move. You are part of the pioneers across the state, and actually, believe it or not, across the entire country. MPO responsibility for a safety action plan or something of its type has actually been part of federal law since the federal authorization package known as ICE-T, which is about 20 years ago. But there are very few MPOs or council of governments across the country that have actually moved and stepped into making that a reality. So I want to thank you on behalf of the safety community broadly, within Oregon in particular, for your work on that. And we were proud to be somewhat of the underwriter for part of the project work and the financing. The financing that we received, I'm going to sneak through there. The financing that we received that's related to helping you with that plan was at the very beginning of when we were doing our update at the state level. Paul Mather, the Highway Division Administrator, and I had a conversation about how can we help local communities feel a part of the statewide plan. How can we help local communities own safety? Because it is local. It is each and every one of us. It's not something you can put on a piece of paper, pass a law, pass a policy, and all of a sudden things change. We all have to affect change on our own personal level. So Mr. Mather and I did 2 things. One, we created $1 million bucket, and that's when it's gone, it's gone. But that is to support communities and projects like what you just have done, with the ability to have an analyst, or the research, or the auditors, or the field hearings, whatever the local community chose, what of that suite of needs made sense for what was happening. And so thank you for taking part of that, because for your own community, but you've also set a mark for others to follow you. The process that you use, the community engagement that you use, the way you did the data and were able to define the needs for your communities will influence the communities following you. Right now we have 8 communities that are in that list to potentially use those funds for similar action plans at the local level.
Does this go with
That's the executive summary. As was mentioned earlier, in October, the Transportation Commission passed the state's safety action plan, which is this broader document. I've got a couple copies of this if there's anybody that is dying to have one. What you have at your station is the executive summary. So these partner together. And that may be something, I know in your last meeting minutes you talked about outreach. Maybe something you think about is a companion document that you can use that's a little bit easier. And I think we need to get even thinner than this, because this is still possibly too long for some to be able to walk through what's going on. But it's sometimes hard to talk about a statewide initiative without at least a few pages explaining the entire state and the needs of the state. So that's the statewide level. The $1 million is for yours, that you, like you had done and other communities are doing as well.
Great.
The second piece that we had used that in that conversation, we set up money for, out of ODOT, there is a local technical assistance program, and we put money towards 3 years of a circuit rider position that is intended to go to cities and counties around the state and be available to help them understand how do I make sense of all this data that's out there, this traffic data, this population data, crash data. Some of our jurisdictions are very well staffed and have expertise in an area. Very luckily, most jurisdictions do not. So the idea of the circuit rider is to help those that have good knowledge get better, and those that have ground zero level needs, what can that circuit rider do to help them for their own conversations around safety for their community that they represent. Those were direct out of the fact that we started the work on updating our safety action plan at the state level that we thought out ahead and put in motion as the conversation of this document went through. It took a year and a half as you went through your process of community involvement. More than 20 field hearings on this document and a web-based input session with more than 500 people giving comment, 15 or so committee meetings dedicated just to the document. So heavy citizen influence, but as that was going along, there were things we at the agency already started to put in play. One of those being, if we had the slideshow, so if you've got the hard copy, we'll cheat and go to the second slide on the first page. That is representing currently within my office what project commitment and funding for programs resides in Lane County through the ODOT Safety Division. So on the left-hand side, we'll kind of walk around it clockwise, starting with Eugene Police Department. There are grants and agreements with Eugene Police Department around speed, around safety belt, child safety, around impaired driving, and as Fran mentioned, around pedestrian education and enforcement. The speed, why you see two numbers there, is we are literally in a spot of negotiation and amending the speed grant with Eugene Police Department from $5,000 up to $25,000. Through People Carlson, our Region 2 safety coordinator. She just yesterday or today sent that to the headquarters office to get ready to process to see the increase for the City of Eugene Police Department. In the very top, in place there on purpose, related to the Lane Council of Governments, the Safe Communities Project, which I know you have a presentation coming up on that. The reason why I purposely put it on the slide in that spot is my hope is that program, that project can help with everything around this circle about having a concentrated community effort that brings in all of these players from these programs that are currently going on in highway safety. With the Lane County Sheriff's Office, we have safety belt program and a DUI program. I will note, and I'm not meaning to pick on our friends from Lane County, but I think it's just related to the staffing situation. There are grants that have been offered that they've just not been able to accept due to staffing levels. So it's something to think about as a broad community here. Are there things that this group can do in order to help that situation out so that there is adequate staffing for?
We have a list.
You have a list, good. Yeah, well, I saw it in the draft plan. So then a small grant through Nicole's hands to Western Lane Ambulance around child passenger safety, seats for low or no income families. Doesn't it look like a big number? Part of that is because of the federal level. There's one thread of money that my office sees, and there's only 5% of that thread of money we're able to put towards seats. So we maximize that 5% and try and get as much of the money out across the state as we can. Springfield Police Department is participating in the Pedestrian Safety Enforcement Program. DRE, that is the Drug Recognition Expert. That's roughly 200 officers from city, county, and OSP that are specially trained in dealing with drug-involved driving beyond just alcohol. And it is a major training program to get officers to that level. They're at the very top of the pyramid. There are 4,000 officers around the state. These 200 in this world are at the very, very top. But they're dealing with people that are impaired but are not impaired by alcohol. There's a whole protocol and legislation and everything related to that. But you have Springfield Police Department and Lane County Sheriff's Office that have officers that are DREs that are here in your community.
And can I ask, do they do this via recognition, since there isn't necessarily testing the way you would do a breathalyzer or some other test, or how do they do this?
Madam Chair, great question. So if an officer pulls someone over for unsafe operation of a vehicle, if in the field sobriety testing they can see that impairment exists, and when they do the field sobriety testing and then when they initially do a breath test, but it shows no alcohol present, but there's impairment, they then can call the DRE in, and our office covers that call-out time. The DRE will go into a second battery of tests, an extended field sobriety testing situation, to determine what others of the other drug categories might be present with that individual being behind the wheel. They will also do some medical rule out. If someone may be in a diabetic coma or something along that lines, they're off to the hospital because there's an impairment, but it's not, it's a substance. But these officers are trained to go through that protocol, and they get to a spot where there's an arrest. They will then deal with urine or blood potentially as a chemical, so that the impairment is supported by presence. Any of the impaired driving arrests, including alcohol, those two things are what the officer has to prove: impairment and presence. The breath machine could deal with presence of alcohol, but that's it, nothing else. So that's when you get into urine or blood, and those two bodily substances are good for some substances, where others you have a choice between the two. Which test you want to try and do, because you're suspicion of what is on board for that person while they're operating the vehicle, or cycling, or riding. Did I help answer the question?
Yeah, I mean, because I know that we have discussions around marijuana in particular, because it can be in a system longer. So THC as a substance to be shown as presence, blood is the bodily fluid where you would best get it, because THC can reside in the fat cells of the body and reside up to 30 to 45 days later, and urine as the chemical process of that, sorry, that's the reality of it, folks. It can reside, it'll show presence for that long, and blood it will not. Oh.
Because of the whole way blood is filtered, the ability to catch it and closer to the moment of impairment to then say presence. Blood is now getting in this state, getting blood as an evidence. You're dealing with a search warrant, you're dealing with appropriate medical personnel, and there's a whole litany of things that go down that process for search and seizure.
Madam Chair, I just finished 2 days on a jury, and I know all about this.
Oh, you do? Yes. Well, I know it's a little, it's a little more complicated.
Yes.
So I just wanted to kind of clarify.
And you have experts both those jurisdictions. So at some point in time, you want to have someone come in and do a presentation on what that is to bring everybody's education level up. You have people right here that can come in and explain a little bit to you.
Officer Hart, for one.
Yeah, and we might want to consider that, just so we're more knowledgeable about how this works, because I think as time goes on, we're going to be more sophisticated about how we deal with this, because it is a safety issue.
Yeah.
Towards the bottom of the slide, on page 2, with the transit district, we have the Safe Routes to School program coordinator, and so happy to continue to support that program. We have an impaired driving overtime grant to University of Oregon Police Department, and then on the coast with Florence Police Department, they participate in safety belts, impaired driving, as well as the pedestrian safety enforcement. All told, right now, within the communities of Lane County, there are 16 projects from the safety division that have a value of over $300,000 for the grants. This third slide, the top of the second page, is the same information, but what I've done for you is to tell you what the topic area is. So that was the financial and the who. This is the what. And the reason I give this slide did that for you is because there are ways that you can crosswalk what's going on there to here. And I'm not sure if this is still the front cover. This is the version of your plan that I had with some of my comments on it. But You have the opportunity, as this body and then through the Safe Communities Program, really to tap into some folks around these topic areas that you address as some of your emphasis areas and action items that are here. The next two slides are around, from a different point of view, from training. So from my office, we're responsible for the teen driver education program in the state, and we're responsible for the motorcycle safety training for the state. Mandatory for anybody that wants to get an endorsement on their driver license to operate a motorcycle must go through our program. Mr. Chris Henry is here. He's actually one of the governor appointees as a citizen to the Governor's Advisory Committee on Motorcycle Safety, so he's very in tune with what is going on within this program. The fourth slide is sharing with you the teen driver education. These are the 15, 16, or 17-year-olds that have gone through the state certified program. The reason why for some of the zeros in the 15 column is just because locally there was an accounting change of who was reporting the students. But the call, and the other is for District 4J, they chose to turn in 2 years worth of student lists instead of one in each year. And it wasn't going to try and figure and go backwards on the time, but to share with you that 1,600 students in Lane County that have gone through the formal driver education program from my office, beyond the training and the classroom and behind the wheel, from a financial investment, because we subsidize the parent cost of that program, up to $250 per kid. So that page alone right there represents over $400,000 that have invested in teens getting it right when they first get that piece of plastic that says they can be out on the road, and tries to teach them very much around multimodal and risk awareness and how to assess the situation they're in order to try and address the risk that may be presented. Page 5.
Springfield isn't on here at all.
At William Lane, at the Bob Kiefer Center.
Oh, well, Lamb Lane does Springfield.
Yeah, we have them there all the time.
Okay. Yes.
So I just had a question. Does this work in conjunction with the high school training driver's ed programs and private driver's ed training programs, or does ODOT supervise the whole thing?
I have responsibility for the entire program, whether it's public, private. From the private side, private companies, if they choose to do the classroom and behind the wheel and do the 30 hours of theory and the 6 hours of practice and 6 hours of observation of practice, they must certify through our program.
Okay.
And hit the standards. Public high schools, community college, educational service districts, and county governments are allowed by statute to also deliver the program. And we subsidize up to $250 per pupil underneath in order to try and bring the cost down, so it can be something that all families in the state can take advantage of. Roughly only 1 out of every 3 teens that get their license choose the driver education route. The other 2/3 are being taught by their parents. So if the situation in highway safety in the state today is acceptable to you, take today's drivers and have them teach the drivers of tomorrow. If you want to see a difference in what the culture is like within our driving community and our walking and cycling community, this is the program where you start to change the lives and the careers of some of these drivers when they first get behind the wheel by themselves. There's room to grow in this program. Only 1 out of 3 go through a formal training program. 2/3 do not.
And you
I'm
get a
surprised
discount
that
on
more-
your insurance as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a huge incentive to do that, aside from the fact that you don't have to teach your child to drive.
Yeah, right.
So do you think, is it the 2/3 going to some other venue, do you think, is that, I don't know how to describe this exactly, is it a lack of knowledge of your program or the familial bond of being scared to death by your kid?
I can only give you anecdotal, but what I've heard from some parents is, one, it costs too much. The $200, $400, even with the state subsidy underneath, that just seems like that's the costliest thing for them to get their license. Well, the reality is wait to get the insurance bill. Most insurance companies in the state of Oregon recognize the program, and you end up with a discount because of going through a training program that I will say personally for myself, for both my children, I went through the program. At the end of 1 year after they got their license, I had already recouped all the costs back because my insurance went down that much. Because they're high ticket, $100 to $200 a month insurance. That's the expensive part of a teen getting a license. But part of it is the cost. The other is availability, because there's not space everywhere within the state. And then lastly, the law says if there's no program or you choose not to take your teen to a program, you can teach them yourselves. You just have to do, instead of 50 hours with them in the car, you have to do 100 hours with them in the car.
Okay.
are asked to certify that when you come to the desk at DMV, that you are as a parent are signing under penalty of, oath that you did do the 100 hours with them.
But that is self-reporting.
It's self-reporting.
I just have one question, and is that regards to just these numbers that you provided here, do you ever cross-reference in regards to teen accidents or fatalities in terms of distribution as to who's going through the, is there some correlation as to if you got the driving training, you're less likely, and there's some numbers to show on that?
So then for Ethan's lunch bill, give it to me so that I'll take care of his lunch bill here. Oregon is the only state that has now been through 2 formal studies on that exact question.
Okay.
And the answer to that is that yes, it makes a difference. The first study came back and said for teens that go through the formal driver education program compared to those that are parent taught, you have 10 to 12% fewer incidents of being involved in a crash, 50 to 55% fewer instances of getting a citation, and more than 100% fewer incidents of being suspended for poor driving behavior. Second study was done in comparison, taking us with Manitoba, Canada, and then was going to be Montana. Their point program coordinator unfortunately died from brain cancer, and they had to back out of the study because they didn't have anybody there to pick up where it was going. When looked at, it confirmed the fact that if you go through professional driver training on the process, you are less likely to get into a crash, less likely to be involved in citation, and their study said, and very much less likely to be involved in anything related to alcohol or other drugs while you're behind the wheel. So it does show that going through the training makes a difference. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just, with my William Lane hat on, real quick, just want to say that maybe I could give you my card and we can talk about how to increase that marketing collaboration in the Springfield area.
Yeah. Love it. The next slide on page 5 is then around motorcyclist training, and again, this is mandatory by law, and those are the number of students that have gone through, and locally here you have a program that's delivered at Lane Community College. The base of this program is called Team Oregon, that's housed at Oregon State University, and we've had a long-standing relationship with them for delivering statewide program. You see you've got more than 1,900 students in the last 2 years that have gone through the class on their way to obtaining a motorcycle endorsement. That investment behind the scenes, we subsidize that training as well to the tune of roughly $70 to $71 per pupil, per person going through. There's another $140,000 of investment in Lane County related to that program coming through my shop. Then to transition, Madam Chair, the bar chart on slide 6, and yes, state of Oregon, the last 2 years, we saw an increase in fatalities across the state. And that's coming off of 2 years that were the lowest in the state of Oregon since 1944. So we were at 70-year lows, and then we saw increases in the late 2014 and definitely in 15 and in 16. A little hard to read, I apologize because I was hoping it would be up on the screen, but the dark number on the bottom, statewide, these are the number of fatalities that had occurred through April 27th. And went back 6 or 7 years for you on that particular chart. And then the gray bar was what we ended up at the end of the year for the prior years. You'll see that in 2017, we're as of the 27th of April, we're at 93 fatals. That is 31% down from last year. When I talk to my counterparts, particularly on the West Coast, we're the only ones seeing a reduction. Almost everybody else is continuing to see an increase. That number in 2017, you go back, it's as low as we were back in 2011, 2012. If things hold true, and I wish it would be zero, from here forward. If things hold true, that my estimate is that we'll be somewhere around 345 to 350, which would be then 150 fewer fatals this year compared to just last year. Some of that effort is related to the work done on this plan. For the 18 months that we worked on this document, one of the things that within my office, we immediately took that research and information and went and said, what do we do differently? What do we program differently? The speed programs that you saw on the slides earlier are a result of that. Securing additional funding around safe routes to school, at least for the non-infrastructure side, like we have with the transit district here, we were able to secure funding all the way out through 2021 to continue those particular programs around the state. We went through in the work zone area and have changed policy about what traffic control looks like and how we negotiate with law enforcement around construction projects. We've created a distracted driving task force, which has gotten a lot of press, and on this last Monday, the House of Representatives passed a bill to modify the distracted driving law within Oregon. And at 1 o'clock today, I've got a phone call with Chief Counsel from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration from their office, because we're trying to come into compliance with federal law that may give us the opportunity to get some federal funding for distracted driving in the state of Oregon. That bill may turn some lights green for us to get some funding within the state towards distracted driving. That started when this work was beginning on the state safety plan. You've heard about All Roads, and Nicole may be able to share with you some information, and Franny may as well, about the All Roads Transportation Project that prior to a few years ago was only on state highways where safety infrastructure work was done. Roadway work was only on the state highway. That bucket at the federal level did not change. It was Mr. Mather and I, we chatted about that meeting I mentioned earlier about how do we deal with something that doesn't worry about what jurisdiction we're in. We're talking about Oregonians. We're talking about the safety of Oregonians. We need to talk about spots and segments and corridors where infrastructure can be part of the solution to make a change. So All Roads Transportation Safety came out of that meeting as well in the conversation related to here, and that is going to go through its second evolution in 2019-2021 because of the guidance that's coming out of the state policy plan. So there'll be some slight changes around there. And then lastly, Madam Chair, related to legislation. And I would ask of you as a body, and I know as a public employee we're really put in a spot where we can sometimes advocate or not advocate. But we also have, as Shane showed us a few minutes earlier, we have the citizen role too. Legislation isn't necessarily always where we want something to get better. There are times we need to play defense. We just don't want something cruddy to pass. I would ask you, as you think about your implementation of your plan from statewide policy or from community policies or city ordinances or county ordinances that you may be looking at, be cognizant of things that can make safety better, but also be aware of sometimes of things that might go backwards. And oftentimes things that are going to go backwards is when there's a dearth of people at the testimony table at the legislature to say this is a bad idea, because we don't want to get the legislator upset with us. So maybe it's just something to think about, that there are times when legislation may pop up from a safety point of view that might cause some concerns as well as the positives. And you might think about how do you engage one way or another. I know it's tough because I'm in the same boat. I can't sit at the table of the legislature and be a citizen. They know me as the safety person because I've been the director of the safety office for 20 years. They know me for that. I can't not have that hat on. But there may be opportunities that you might be able to do something locally as well related to that. And I'd be more than happy to answer any further questions. I know we went over time, and I apologize.
So thank you for the presentation. Very much appreciated. So my question is this. So recently, Lane County, we adopted our plan. And one of the things that he's not so new anymore, but our Public Works Director, Tim Elsey, instituted, which I think is going to be extremely beneficial. Lane County, as we know, we've led all counties in fatalities the last 2 years, and we're quite aware of that. What Tim has instituted is when there's an investigation, a crash investigation, that Public Works is involved in the investigation. And in fact, I have a very positive response to an unfortunate fatality that happened actually in the rural part of my district because of Lane County staff involved. Something as simple as signage was able to be put in place on it's an odd curve. You can go into it. It's not bad. Coming out of it, it is really sharp, and that's where the crash happens. So my question is, are there other counties do you know of that are doing the same thing, where Public Works, you have transportation planning staff, engineers that are on the scene of the investigation? What other counties are possibly doing the same thing? And does ODOT have any sort of grant process to help with maybe offset some of those costs involved? Because, 15 years ago, we wouldn't even think anything about it when we were receiving $20 million a year in federal timber receipts. Last year, that number was $800,000. And so, does ODOT have a program for this? Are other counties involved in doing the same thing? And I'll leave it at that.
I'll try to answer all three real quick. Yes, there are other communities that are doing such. It's called maybe coming looking at it in a spot where you have a couple different players around the table than some of the other communities, but there are not very many, particularly on scene. There are definitely communities that then will go through, digest the incident, and talk about what potentially can be done or put in place. Wouldn't happen again. So there are some. Related to training, we sponsor every year a law enforcement training. It's done every February. And there is also a crash reconstruction program, and that's actually a formal designation for law enforcement where they can become a certified individual. Quite often they'll testify in court. I don't know if that was the same case that you had a certified crash reconstructionist in your case or not, but there are people that have that level, and it asks them to do that comprehensive look when you can and resources through there. From a financial point of view, it's pretty limited. My office, and one of the documents that I brought with me, if you'd like, this is, while this document deals with the policy side, the grants that you saw up there and the programs you saw up there, my office with Nicole and the other 15 program managers, we do an annual business plan for the money we're given, state or federal. What are we buying with it? And this is published every July. And you know for the next year what we're working on, project by project, fund by fund. There are 18 fund accounts in my division. All 18 have strengths. And unfortunately, that's the back way around to your question is, right now, the answer I don't think there is in order to help offset staff cost. The training part of it, maybe some of the equipment related, there's potential. But generally speaking, of those 18 fund accounts, this is not a topic area that funds come through my office, that it sits square in the middle of a potential. We all deal with that related to the funding criteria, whatever. But I brought copies. This is the current year. That's where those grants came from and those training programs came from, and have about 15 copies. And I'll leave them behind. That you can dissect this and see what your safety office for the state's doing, what we're spending our money on. That's directed by this document. What's in here is what we turn around and program. So I think I catch all three?
No, you did, and I appreciate that, because Lane County you have the population base of Lane County of approximately 70 to 75% located in one area, but over 50% of the fatalities are on rural highways. And so and it's a significant issue. What we're finding out, and I bring this up because it used to be you threw money at traffic teams, and still we want to have that because we really don't have a rural traffic team anymore. But now with public works and with engineers, your transportation planning staff being on scene doing the crash investigation, it's something as simple as maybe just a tweak in the engineering. It's a tweak in the signage. I think Mohawk Valley, I think David sent me something that it was a signage, and it cost a few $1,000s, and hopefully that's going to help alleviate, because the problem is it's not just been crashes on that curve, it's been crashes with fatalities on that one single curve. And finally a citizen contacted me, and I related to David Reeser from our staff and Tim, and they got involved immediately, and within a month's time, I gave all the credit to staff. I didn't do a thing. I just answered a phone call. And so so I bring that up because I think that'll be key, because I'm talking to some of my colleagues in Clackamas County. They're second behind Lane County fatalities. So we're kind of talking about those same areas and how we can work together, collaborate, and work with our legislative delegation on seeing what kind of dollars can be available on the safety side. So, but I appreciate it.
On the public works side, which many of you may have connections with, University of Portland and Oregon State University have training that is called Human Factors Engineering. And what that's doing is trying to open up the eyes of folks that are in public works to say, when you build something or you put something out there, what's the typical human reaction going to be? So if you do want some attention on that corner, it may not be the corner that you're dealing with. It may be some things that are upstream. How do you set all of us up so that the roadway system is self-educating and self-enforcing? And you don't need law enforcement, and you don't need emergency medical, because the system itself is letting me know what I'm supposed to be doing or not doing. And a little bit to Shane's comments about the system itself being available. You can build it in a way that you can have those attributes. That's part of what's out there. So I'd encourage on the public works side, there's also training besides law enforcement.
If I could add to that too, part of the crash investigation work is work that I do. I look at every fatal crash in Lane County, whether it's on state highways or city roads or county roads, every fatal crash that happens in Lane County, I look at and I do at least a short investigation to find out what the cause of the crash was, if there was impairment, if they were speeding, if there were any citations issued. And then I have an engineer, a traffic investigator that works in my office. And if there's something that I think stands out, like maybe if it was a roadway departure, lane departure type crash, I'll ask about, would rumble strips have prevented this crash? Is the signage updated? And then outside of that, if there's, we also look at SPIS, it's the Safety Priority Index System. So not just fatal crashes, but if there's a cluster of crashes at one location, like a curve, then those are flagged, and we also look at those to see if there's any improvements that can be made. So there's actually quite a lot of work being done already, and I usually, if there's something that I notice and it's not on a state highway, then I usually would contact the Public Works people that I work with, or if it's an education type thing or an impairment type thing, or there's citations related to it, like a lot of speed crashes in one location, then I'll contact the police department and ask that they do enforcement there. And then we have the enforcement grants that go along with that. So when I provide for example, the speed enforcement grants, I'll look specifically at where the most speed crashes are occurring, and then ask the law enforcement if they can do more enforcement at those locations. So it's all very targeted.
Well, if you want to think out of the box, Public Works Director on your speed dial, I'd advise you to keep Tim on your speed dial. So.
And with Bill and Franny and Nicole, you've got some great ODOT representatives that are accessible to you. Please take advantage of them. And I appreciate the invitation to be here. Hopefully for those that had questions coming in, I know I saw some late last week. I hope I caught everybody's questions in what I presented, and also for those that had during the conversation.
Well, we sure appreciate you coming, and it's good work. And we are very hopeful that those numbers continue to go down. So thank you. Thank you very much. So the next item on the agenda is also safety program, and it's Steve.
Thank you, and a really good lead-in here to my presentation. I also have a PowerPoint, which you now have in front of you. There's a couple printed copies that Dan passed out just a few minutes ago. So Steve Dobrinich, Transportation Safety Coordinator at LCOG, launching a new program called the Safe Communities Program. I'm just here to provide a little update about the program and some info about how we're actually implementing our local transportation safety actions, and relaying a lot of the actions that have been outlined by ODOT down here at the local level. So as you know, this is a partnership between LCOG and Lane County, and that means the program really touches on both our urban area as well as the rural parts of Lane County. And just to kind of recap, our goal broadly is to respond to the rise in traffic deaths in our region, and the approach is to really take a preventative approach, very similar to what's been taken in the public health field. So, essentially our data shows that we can't continue to do what we're doing. We need to, take direct action to work on this issue, and that's what this program is all about. So I'm actually on the third slide now for anyone who's following along. And it outlines our safety framework, which highlights the 6 E's of transportation safety. So things like education and enforcement focus on the behavioral aspects of this issue. Engineering, so that's the design of our actual roadways and slowing traffic down and essentially making sure that our roads are built for safety. And also I'll just highlight that this is also a resource issue, so making sure that we have the resources available for emergency medical services, for enforcement folks, and just making sure that we're utilizing all the funding resources that are available to us. So then to jump to talking a little bit about our program actions, and I think that's what most everyone's interested in hearing about. So there's a lot that's happening currently. In the early stages right now, we're working on developing our relationships with safety partners. So it's been an interview process to chat with safety folks to learn more about how the Safe Communities program might actually serve them. And while we're doing that, we're also rolling out several different initiatives, which I'll talk about in just a minute. I also, before doing that, just wanted to highlight that we are moving forward with connecting with public information officers to put together a media event utilizing many of the suggestions from our partners at BEST to make sure that we're, announcing essentially to the public that this program's happening and that these plans exist and that we're doing something about them. So in terms of engineering, our actions first focus on helping to develop infrastructure evaluation criteria for the Eugene Springfield Safe Routes to School program. We're actually going to bring on an intern this summer at LCOG to get on the ground and take a look at infrastructure projects and help in the prioritization process. As mentioned before, a fatal crash investigation team is being launched for Lane County, as well as a systemic engineering implementation team, which is taking a look at or supporting the work that's being done to make road changes throughout, safety changes throughout the county. In terms of enforcement, I think the key here is just high visibility. We want people to feel like enforcement is happening, beyond just the actual enforcement activity that's happening on the ground. We want the perception of enforcement. So one of the early actions that we're taking is to begin distributing promotional DUI enforcement material. For example, for our Florence Roadie Days, which will be taking place in a couple weeks, and we'll actually be passing out flyers at next week's Lane Act meeting with respect to that. Looking at purchasing speed feedback signs, and also looking to address funding needs of our district attorney crash investigator. In terms of education, producing road safety videos, we'll be launching a Safe Communities website, which will be set to go live hopefully in the next couple months. That's a really high priority right now, is just to have a landing spot for folks who want to connect and learn more about transportation safety. And we're also supporting the development of a bicycle-friendly driver training. So I already mentioned the media event. Just to kind of wrap up in terms of what's ahead, I already mentioned continuing our outreach to safety partners. We'll be further supporting high visibility DUI enforcement, targeted distracted driving and speeding. And then another one I want to highlight is a key for our funders at ODOT is to establish a regional traffic safety commission. And so we're looking at several different models around the state to just understand what's been how we might bring that here to Lane County. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Steve, thanks. Good presentation. So when we talk about targeting distracted driving and speeding, what do we do different than what we're doing now?
That's one that I haven't gotten really deeply into yet, but we've tossed around a few ideas, and there's ideas about apps that can freeze a phone, or these are apps that you would voluntarily choose to put on your phone, or there's a great one that Ellen was looking at, which was able to just track your driving habits. So you would get a grade at the end of a drive from point A to point B, and it would tell you, you swipe this many times, and that means you get a grade of a C+, or, if you didn't touch your phone, you'd, presumably get an A. So,
does it send that info to your parents?
I don't know about that, but we could look into it.
Is there any enforcement beyond the apps, like having specific traffic cops sitting there watching people talking on their phones or doing stuff?
I think the examples that we've looked at to this point, no, but maybe there's, if anybody else who has any input, but.
I can answer that really quickly.
Sure.
We actually, ODOT pays for overtime enforcement for the occupant protection program, and because it's for safety belts, it's called click it or ticket. And because Oregon has the highest use rate, safety belt use rate in the country, 98%. 98%. That's through observation surveys for safety belts. We've been allowed to extend the enforcement to distraction. And so I can't remember the dollar amount, but we have given grants to law enforcement in Lane County specifically for that. I think it was on the slide that Troy showed. If you looked at the occupant protection enforcement grants, those also include distraction.
For enforcement.
For enforcement.
Thanks.
Franny?
On the distracted driving, there's an educational thing that I just saw 2 days ago. ODOT has this trailer, and inside the trailer is a smashed up vehicle from a young girl named Lexi that died, and her passenger was severely injured when she was on the cell phone, and the car's a crumpled mass, right, with the airbag deployed. And it's in a glass enclosed trailer, and they bring it out and put it out in high schools, parking lots. Just leave it out there, and all the kids look around. And then there's a display talking about how this girl was on her cell phone, and they actually show a map of all the times she texted and where she was on the highway at that time, and then her last text. I mean, it's very, kind of scary, awful. Anyway, it was out in Philomath at the Philomath High School last week, and then it was going back to Salem. So let me know, and we can figure out a way to get it out to different high schools. And this would be the great time of year to do it. There's not much more time, and maybe next fall as well. It's just a real aha for people, I think.
That would be, great to follow up on.
And then also I've seen some PSA announcements and at theaters, movie theaters, which I think is a perfect way to get people right before the movie in that 20 minutes that they do commercials. And I've seen there was NHTSA funded commercials about distracted driving and cell phones specifically. And it's really, it's shocking to people. So maybe it'll make a difference, I hope. Thanks.
Gary?
Yeah, I've two points. I've noticed there's more and more presentation on television about railroad crossings and trying not to beat the train. And especially when they make the comment that if a train's going 55 miles an hour and it hits you at the intersection, you're going to ride down the track with that train for a mile. And I also noticed you've got your data here through 2013 for roadway or lane departure crashes. Is there any, because now almost everybody and their mother who puts out a car has the beeping system for when you cross the line or something to that effect. Have you gotten any data since 2013 that shows those are going down at all?
I do know there's typically a year delay on that, but I'll let Nicole speak to more specific.
Just stay up there.
I know about all these things. So I actually brought the number from 2015, and the number of fatal and serious injury, the number of people that were fatalities or seriously injured in Lane County. Let's see. Lane County has the highest number, the second highest number in the state, and it's, let's see, I have it right in front of me, 81 in 2015. And it's actually, the number has gone up. I think I actually have a chart that shows, I might have it back in my office, but it shows the number from year to year, and the number has gone up considerably. 2015 was the worst year that we've seen in quite a long time. And then I've got preliminary numbers for 16 and 17, and it's gone down slightly, but Lane County is one of the highest for lane departure.
And those numbers are based on the same criteria? So I guess what I'm asking, is it safe to say that you're not really all that much more protected if your car beeps when you cross the line or
well, I think there's some delay. a lot of people are driving 10-year-old vehicles or older.
Yeah.
And so there's quite a delay between the technology and then, you know, having people get newer cars. And so, you know, I don't think it's caught up quite yet. And hopefully we'll see a reduction. But, you know, there's still, I've been reading some of the research, and there's still some evidence that people are still crashing, even with the technology. It's not, you know, it's not foolproof.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I
I can
think
see,
there's
I can see
definitely-
too where it might make you think you can drive more boldly, because
Right.
if you make a mistake, it's going to warn you.
And I think we've done quite a lot of work around, ODOT has the Roadway Departure Initiative, and we've really put an emphasis on installing, especially centerline rumble strips. It's been a huge priority for us because of the high number and because of the severity of crashes. You know, when you have a lane departure crash, it seems like they're usually rural crashes and at high speeds, and so you either cross the center line and hit another car head on, or you exit to the right and you hit a tree or something hard. So people tend to have higher injuries in those types of crashes. So it's been a priority.
Okay, thank you.
I went to Florence for the first time in quite a while, and those center rumble strips are very effective. For those of us who wander just a little bit, like those curves. Anyway.
The one time you did it.
Yeah, the one time.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I thought that was such a great idea, is to know that you're hit those center strips. And you can see them during the day coming. So, I thought that was a great idea, because they kind of do the same thing. They let you know that you've drifted just a little bit. So, yeah.
It helps too, I think, if there's anything, you know, if there's people that you can talk to encourage their use, because we have received some pushback. You know, citizens that live near where rumble strips are installed sometimes complain about the noise, even though it's really quite faint. I mean, you know, we don't install them right next to people's houses or anything, but we've received some pushback about installing those, even though they have such a huge safety benefit.
We've removed them in a few instances.
We have.
Really? Yeah. Well, that beats the sound of the car coming through your living room.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So anyway, yeah, that's it. So those are, so anyway, so what we can do to help encourage. Thank you. Okay, are there other questions? You were taking questions.
Yeah, if there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer them, and otherwise I'm happy to just follow up later. If there's comments or questions, feel free to get in touch with me.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next on our agenda, we actually have about 3 or 4 items that we've seen about a month ago, and today's we're set to do approval processes. So, and I'm thinking that Paul, you're the staff person here for all of these approvals. Is that?
I am, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you, and good afternoon. So a couple of these will be fairly straightforward, but there are a couple of changes which I need to talk to. First up, item 6C is requesting adoption of the Central 9 MPO FY 2018 and FY 2019 Unified Planning Work Program. You did see this last month, held a public hearing and had a public comment period open through April 30th. There were no comments received on the Unified Planning Work Program, and it has not changed since the draft that was in your packet. So this is one of the straightforward ones where we're asking today for approval of Resolution 2017-04 adopting the work program.
Okay. Comments, questions? Okay. So you're just waiting for, we just need to vote. Yes.
A motion to approve that resolution would be appreciated.
Okay.
Madam Chair, move approval.
Okay.
Second.
Second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that carries. Next item.
Next is item 6D. I will move on to the Central Union MPO 2040 Regional Transportation Plan. The RTP, again, was in your packet last month. You held a public hearing, and the public comment period was open through April 30th on that also. I will note in the packet that we have a cover memo that includes the 4 public comments that were received through the Lane Voices website during the public comment period. I'd be happy to address those, although as noted in the memo, those comments really fall on facilities or suggestions that are outside of the MPO area. So we did not consider them pertinent to the adoption of the RTP at this time, not that they're still important comments. And we're here with again, a unanimous recommendation from your Staff Advisory Committee asking for approval of Resolution 2017-05 adopting the RTP.
So moved.
Oh, is there a second?
Second.
Can I ask one question, Paul? Because
Yes.
there was a couple of comments about the garbage trucks. So I'm assuming that might be a Lane Act. Is it, how big an issue is it? Because it sounds like there is not just garbage trucks, but trucks in general. So,
I can comment real quickly. Both Alex Kyler and myself have actually been talking to Senator Beyer about this issue. And what we did, Madam Chair, Madam Mayor, is we linked this to Glenwood, because we're going to shutter Glenwood. Lane County is. And so all trucks will then go out to, so there has to be some sort of infrastructure access, a better access to the interchange that's out there right now off of near Diller Road or on Diller Road actually. And so we've actually had initial conversations about how this may work as far as the transportation plan that's being discussed now, because they are putting projects in this transportation plan. And while this has not been, I would say, overly vetted by ODOT staff or even Lane County staff, but I think at this point in time, it's good to begin that conversation. And the last conversation I had with Senator Beyer said he agrees, but I think from our perspective, Lane County's perspective, is we'll probably get to working with our staff to at least look at this and then start working with ODOT, because it is on Interstate 5, and start working with that to see how much that makes sense. But I would suggest that may be a significant issue, and what's even more so is Lane County is right now we're in what I call very preliminary initial conversations with Douglas County, because Douglas County's landfill capacity is 10 years. That's it. Ours is over 100. And so you may see trucks coming from Douglas County up I-5 into Lane County to Short Mountain. And so this would cause this to even have more significance, I would suggest. So those are the discussions are so preliminary right now, but at least I would say they're conversations. And hopefully we can it'll get a little bit farther down the road. And so Franny, expect some additional talks about this and how this relates and where it goes. So that's it. That's what I know about it at this point in time.
Well, as someone who's really looking forward to shuttering Glenwood,
really,
I would is whatever we can do or help support, but it sounds like it's an issue that we need to deal with. So keep us informed about what those discussions are, so that we can be as helpful as possible. But that doesn't have to do with our direct, what's on the agenda now.
Not directly.
No. Other questions about this? Yes, Ellen.
Paul, can you refresh my memory? I'm looking at the MTIP. The Beltline Delta Highway intersection, is that in here?
So you're looking, at the MTIP?
Yeah, we're doing the MTIP right now, right?
We're doing the
RTP.
RTP right now.
RTP. Sorry.
And
Where is it in RTP?
The project is listed in the RTP in several places, and there's actually a little bit of updated information on that. We did go through this last month where you will find in the RTP several phases of the project that most people consider when they think of the Beltline project, which is basically Delta Highway to River Road. There's two phases, 120 million in the RTP for the first phase and 130 million for the second phase. There's also a Beltline project from Roosevelt to West 11th to finish the conversion of that to 4 lanes, and that's also in the RTP. The updated information is that we have been working, and this was actually going to be part of my legislative update, we have been working with ODOT and to get the legislature more detailed information on our funding request for the Beltline Delta to River Road project. I'll touch on that more later.
So what does it mean that those two, phase 1 and phase 2, are in here?
The Regional Transportation Plan, the RTP, is required by the federal regulations of the MPO to identify all needs over a 20-year minimum horizon to keep the transportation system operating in the way that the region wants it to operate. And so, again, improvements to Beltline are identified in the long-range plan. It's really in the MTIP, which you were referring to a minute ago, where we hopefully will get to actual funding of the project before too long. But the RTP is a long-range plan, and so what it means for those projects to be in there is that they're identified as a need over the long horizon.
With the possibility for funding and implementation, but this doesn't authorize those projects.
Well, it doesn't authorize in any way the funding for the projects. It is a requirement under the federal rules for large federal expenditures or even large regionally significant state expenditures that they be listed in the RTP.
So it's not in here, it can't get funded.
Exactly. So it's the first step, the very first step.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that they will be in the form that they're.
Not in any way, but we are working on that in other ways.
Because I've heard from people in Eugene saying that our TIP authorizes those projects, which isn't correct.
The RTP does not.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Comments? So you're the same, you're looking for motion to approve.
Yes, I believe you had a motion and a second to.
All motions that we did. All right, so all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The opposed? Okay.
Second.
Who was the second? Sid. Okay, now the MTIP.
Okay, so if I can move on to the MTIP, this is the one where we do have a fair number of substantial changes, including one that really just developed in the last 24 hours or so. So I'm going to try and walk through those, starting with the cover memo in your packet. The cover memo in your packet has a list of changes that are fairly minor. These are just things that have been caught as we've moved along and vetted this not only with the member agencies but with ODOT. And just for the most part, these are corrections that are in your cover memo. Nothing really significant, but I'd be happy to answer any questions there. There's two other changes, though, that are more recently come to light. One is that just within the past week or so, Lane Transit District has gone through its Federal Transit Administration certification review, if you will. And one of the things that came out of that certification review just this week, and Lane Transit District talked with me about, is strengthening the demonstration of their projects and their planned expenditures in the MTIP. And that's called the Program of Projects for the Transit District. And so we are asking you to include in your approval today of the MTIP a new table that's at your place. It's labeled as Table 4, which specifically breaks out the FTA 5307 Program of Projects. This is essentially fulfilling a federal requirement that they demonstrate this as a standalone table. Again, we put this at your place as a single sheet.
Is there a magnifying glass to pass?
There isn't, but what I will say is that this is not any new information. It's the exact same information that's already in your draft MTIP in the 11 by 17 pages, Counselor. It's just taking those LTD projects out of the larger list of projects and showing them as a separate 5307 program. That satisfies the FTA requirements, or at least part of their requirements. So I want to note that that table will be included in the document that we're asking you to adopt today. A second change is, like I said, the one that came out in just the past 24 hours, and it has to do with the CMAQ funding, the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Funding. I'll try and make this short, but it is a rather lengthy story, as you know. The background, of course, is that we're now CMAQ eligible. We received a little over $7 million in CMAQ funding for FY 16, 17, and 18. You're going to hear more about that in a couple of agenda items. That $7.1 million over the, a little more than that over the 3 years is derived from an assumption of what we would receive and Salem would receive by being added to the current CMAQ formula. As you know, there's a statewide advisory committee that Mayor Lundberg, Tom Schwetz serves on, and I'm staffed to, trying to decide how to allocate the CMAQ funds starting in FY19. Without knowing how those funds are going to be allocated, we had assumed that we would not program any of those funds in the MTIP. And indeed, we're not identifying projects for those funds yet in FY19 and beyond. And the OTC chair and ODOT staff over the past year have directed the current CMAQ recipients elsewhere in the state to be very conservative in any assumptions about FY19 and beyond CMAQ programming. That hasn't been the case necessarily, though. What we have found in just the past couple of weeks is that Portland Metro, the Salem-Kaiser MPO, and the Rogue Valley MPO are all programming their CMAQ funds for 19, 20, and 21 as they adopt their new MTIPs. And we're all adopting new MTIPs at the same time because we all do it together with the state adopting a new STIP. So Portland Metro is programming specific CMAQ project funding in 19, 20, and 21. So is Salem, and so is Rogue Valley. In a discussion yesterday with all of those partners and ODOT and FHWA, we agreed to a couple of things. First of all, because OTC has not decided how to allocate those funds, those assumptions that they have made, the other three MPOs have made, may not be accurate. And so as they adopt their MTIPs, they're also going to send a letter to the governor, and the governor approves the MTIPs. They're going to send a letter to the governor saying that we understand these assumptions around CMAQ funding are pending OTC direction on FY19 CMAQ funding, and we will adjust the funding that we have programmed as necessary. In other words, they're being upfront and committing to presumably, possibly reducing their CMAQ funding. The other thing we agreed to yesterday is that it would be appropriate, if you approve it, for us to program in our MTIP today buckets of CMAQ funds for 19, 20, and 21. We don't have projects ready to recommend to you, specific projects yet. We were being a little more conservative. We were being a little more restrained in how we approach this until we had OTC direction for those funds. But it would be appropriate for you today to program a $2.4 million CMAQ bucket for this MPO for FY19, FY20, and FY21, $2.4 million for each year in the MTIP that we're asking you to approve today. That funding is based on the current formula, not on what the OTC will determine as the new formula, but it's based on the current formula. And we would also send a letter to the governor saying that we've understood the direction. We had not planned on programming this money. However, based on the fact that others are, we felt that it was prudent to indicate that these funds are anticipated at this level in a bucket. And when we receive OTC direction on specific funding allocations, we will adjust that bucket and then determine specific projects to program the money for. So I hope that was clear. Two changes we're asking really beyond those in the cover memo as you approve today's MTIP. One is to include this LTD related table, and two is to add CMAQ funding in buckets for 3 years at $2.4 million per year.
Okay.
I'll stop there.
Yes, Franny.
So there is a project that's going to be going to the OTC in a letter for consent, and that's the Coburg interchange. We had some earmark money left over from a long time ago, federal money. And we're going to, we have approval from Federal Highway that we can use it for this interchange design and/or the bridge, to a certain level. So that once it gets OTC adopted, then I'm just wondering if it matters. We get the OTC adoption first, and then it goes into our MTIP.
Is it, so you're asking for funding to be put into the STIP?
Yeah.
And it would be part, excuse me, if I can, it would be part of the STIP approval, the 1821 STIP approval scheduled for October or September?
Yeah, it would go in the 1821, right.
Okay. Ideally, the funding should be reflected in both the MTIP and the STIP identically. It is one of those things that, without having the specific information for this approval today, we will have to amend in or reconcile the two documents later.
Okay, so I'll make sure you get the consent letter.
Okay.
That'll explain it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Alan?
Same question about Delta line in the MTIP.
Okay, so the MTIP right now, the one we're asking you to approve is the new 1821. And so it doesn't actually have any Beltline related funding in it, to the best of my knowledge, because all that's going on right now that has funding actually secured is both the NEPA process and the $20 million for the first phase of the interchange at Delta Highway improvements. That money is already in the existing TIP and STIP, the current 1518, and doesn't need to be in this new one.
And that eliminates the crisscross.
Yes, it does. In the new one, we don't have anything yet because we don't have funding for future phases of mainline or Delta interchange improvements. And again, we're working to secure those, but those aren't committed yet, so they're not in the draft MTIP.
And then often in here, there's a thing called signal enhancements.
Yes.
There's like a million of those projects in there. What does that mean?
Well, I would have to turn to the local jurisdictions and probably answer those on a case-by-case basis, to be honest. It is a catch-all phrase that can encompass a number of things. It can encompass upgrading controllers in the signal boxes because some of those controllers in this area are quite old and don't speak to the system or aren't able to be timed along a corridor. It can talk to upgrading a whole series of signal controllers along a corridor so that they're interconnected and can provide for more efficient flow along a number of through a number of intersections. It's that sort of catchphrase for signal improvements or signal upgrades.
So very
generally, the controllers is what you're talking about there for the most part.
Does that include access right away or speed access through for safety vehicles and LTD buses?
It could, but if I'm not answering this correctly, I'll turn to one of the specific staff back there who might know, Rob or somebody else. But I believe it could include those.
It just LTD has the signal light set up on Green Lane that'll change because of the new transit station, and part of that does include Green Lane and River Road, Green Lane and Hunsaker.
Yeah.
That's kind of the rectangle. And one of the enhancements includes a throughway street through there for, I assume, for our vehicles and emergency vehicles also.
Yes, Paul.
I'd be happy to answer other questions. There's two more quick things to note before we ask for approval of Resolution 2017-06 adopting the MTIP. First of all, there is still a discussion ongoing with mostly FTA and air quality staff about the air quality status of one specific LTD project, which is the new transit station on River Road at Hunsaker in that area. It will either be exempt or non-exempt. Originally, FTA staff was concerned that it might not be exempt from air quality because You're building a new station, there's going to be diesel buses idling, there's going to be emissions. What FTA is now, we've clarified for FTA is that that project is not really new capacity and new emissions, it's moving the emissions that are occurring at the current transit station to a new location, so there's no change. So we think it's going to be exempt from air quality at this point. We're asking you to approve the MTIP with the understanding that staff will put the correct designation of that status into the document. It probably will be determined today, later this afternoon, if not tomorrow. We think we have an initial determination this morning on that. And then the last thing I'll mention is that since the cover memo in the packet was put out and the public comment period closed on April 30th, there was one public comment received on the MTIP. I put this at your place also. Again, it is a comment, though, that is specific to a concern outside of the MPO boundary, so it's not something that you need to consider as part of this action.
Any other questions, comments? So this is another looking for an approval.
Approval of 2017-06 to adopt the MTIP with the adjustments I noted.
So moved.
Second. Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
And
looks like we have,
if I could, just one more time, we should probably rename this the Paul Thompson Gadfly Act. For the great work that he's done for us on not only catching us up on this, but getting future funding too.
and of course, we still have we still have one more. We're doing our air quality conformity.
Not that Paul's a gadfly.
Hey, I'm not sure how to take that. Maybe after I retired, you can do that.
It's okay, somebody had to do it, Paul. So, so our next is the MPO air quality determination, which
Yes.
is also an approval process.
This one I will be brief on. It is straightforward. I do want to note that, again, you saw the air quality conformity determination draft last month, had a public hearing and a public comment period open on it. There were no comments received on the document. It is unchanged with the exception of the fact that it contains by default and requirement the project lists and maps from the MTIP that you just adopted. And since those adjusted a little bit, the project lists and the maps and the air quality conformity determination have been adjusted to reflect those changes. With that, we're asking for approval of Resolution 2017-07 adopting the AQCD.
So moved.
Second.
Second, okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Or opposed? Okay, that carries also, that was quick. So now we're talking about CMAQ funding for what's currently available. Yes.
This is the next agenda item. I'm actually going to turn over to Dan, but this, and I guess I'll just stay here. It is for the $7.1655 million of CMAQ funding that we've been provided essentially to cover FY16 through 18, but which we will have to program for FY18.
That's right. So what's required with that is that this board, this committee, has an opportunity to see what our process is for the competitive selection for the projects for the use of these funds. Included in the memo is a description of that process that was put together by the TPC and recommended to this group. Just in summary, it is competitive. The proposed projects are going to be screened for eligibility by MPO staff. There will be an initial project rating completed by the Technical Advisory Subcommittee task through a consensus process based on how well the projects address the region's CMAQ priorities. Then TPC will provide funding recommendations to MPC for approval after public review. Once those are approved by this body, ODOT and then Federal Highway Administration will have an opportunity to review those more closely. Ultimately, Federal Highways determines the eligibility of those projects. So there is a timeline proposed. The applications are proposed to be due June 2nd. We'll then start the process of determining which of those projects to recommend to MPC for approval. Then by August 3rd, we're hoping to have MPC approval of those projects.
Okay. And we're looking at the application.
That's right. So with that process is this application that we put together as well.
So you want comments on the timeline and
Yeah, whatever input or direction you could offer would be appreciated.
As Dan noted, it's a requirement that the policy board essentially approve the process that the MPO uses to program the CMAQ funds for specific projects. So this is your opportunity again to look at the process, how the staff will consider the applications, how you'll receive a recommendation, and then the application, which is, as noted in your cover memo, covers not only the requirements of eligibility and air quality impacts and cost effectiveness, but then essentially in the pages following that, pages 4, 5, and part of 6 in the application, are carried over from what you've had for a number of years in your STPU and TAP fund allocation application, a reflection of other regional priorities such as safety, et cetera.
Alan.
So if I got the process that we're approving, you have to fill out this form.
Yes.
They submit that to MPO, and then it's a competitive process. And the first step is screening by MPO staff, and then rating by the technical advisory subcommittee, which is a subcommittee of the TPC. And why not the whole TPC? Because they're not all involved in the CMAQ area.
The TPC is a formal advisory committee that holds public meetings once a month. The subcommittee is a technical working group that meets several times a month and is not in a public meeting setting, so it's where the initial technical evaluation happens, and then it is as a subcommittee advising TPC, which holds its deliberations in a public meeting.
Oh, and then, okay, then the TPC makes its recommendations to us.
Yes.
And then we approve it, and then it goes to ODOT.
Correct, that's right.
FHJ, FTA for ultimate approval. And then the rating system that the Technical Advisory Committee, what is that? How do they rate them?
So that's consensus-based.
Yeah.
Rather than we decided giving projects a number or something and adding up a number, which some other MPO around the nation have done, we thought this might give the most flexibility to really just arrive as a group with consensus on what priorities ought to be, basing that consensus, of course, on what are CMAQ priorities and other priorities for this area.
So does that mean they're going to be ranked?
Ultimately,
or tiered at least?
Ultimately, we'll come back to this group with a recommended 100% fund list, and then perhaps a few additional that are prioritized in case Federal Highways comes back and has something to say about one of the one included in the 100%.
Do you anticipate that the 100% funding list will be prioritized?
I would not say that we would prioritize them. We haven't in the past done that. We certainly could take that direction. In the past, what we've done is for instance, based on what we've had as discussions so far, we might receive 150 to 200% in applications of the available funding. And of that, your recommendation would be, here's what we recommend for funding at the 100% level, and you would see the rest of the applications. But within that 100% set of projects that we recommend for funding, we wouldn't have prioritized them 1 through X.
What would be helpful to me as a decision maker is that if you did do that, it would be helpful, because if you took the last 2, for instance, and then the next 2, then the question for this body is, are those the right order for those 4 projects or something like that to meet the 100% funding? And so then we know what the trade-off is that you guys are making between the last one in and the last one out, kind of like NC2A brackets, who gets in last, first 4 out, first 4 in. That would be very helpful.
Okay.
If you could do that, at least the rest of them you don't have to rank order them, but the last in, last out would be helpful.
That's good input. And I also want to add that within the consensus recommendation, there will be some data that will be part of the consensus deliberation. And specifically, some of that will be around the air quality benefits that have to the extent possible, be determined quantitatively. And then if not quantitatively, there's also the ability to do a qualitative analysis of the air quality benefits or impacts. The quantitative assessment, it does say on the application that it will be completed by MPO staff, and just so you know, we will be also relying on consultant help for that this first time around. There's some air quality either modeling through a software program called MOVES or other technical analysis that we do have an open contract with a consultant who will likely be assisting us with that the first time around.
Yeah, that was my next question, was how you going to rate them based on what? Because it is for congestion mitigation, air quality. Congestion meaning traffic congestion, right? And air quality meaning emissions, and those two are related, but not necessarily. So what I hear you saying is you're going to have some quantitative measures of the projects that will help you rank them, and is that the sole criteria for determining the ratings?
The quantitative information is not the sole criteria. It is one of the federally required criteria, and it is the one that, for the most part, ODOT and FTA and FHWA, when they review our recommendations for funding, will pay the most attention to, is what are the air quality impacts. So again, that's why they require, to the extent possible, a quantitative analysis of that. There are several tools out there. Dan's already been identifying those for your staff and putting out what the data needs are so that when your staff are writing these applications, they understand they're also going to have to provide the data to enable that quantitative analysis. It might be number of trips. It might be, how much lane capacity is added, if it's something like that, or whatever the inputs are so that we can do that quantitative analysis.
What are the other criteria besides that will be involved in this?
The application runs through, again, the three criteria that we need to look at under the federal requirements, which are eligibility, if that's a criteria, if you will. There's a number of things under eligibility that are listed on page 1 of the application. Page 2 talks about the air quality analysis that is required, and page 3 talks about the cost effectiveness and gives a table that at a national level says here's generally how different types of projects, how their cost effectiveness is for different pollutants. And then pages 4, 5, and 6 really get to the other criteria that are our regional priorities that you've identified previously when you have programmed MPO funds, and that's safety, preservation, transit services, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Those 4 are the other primary criteria that you've directed us previously to use.
Are they equally weighted to air quality analysis?
We've kind of, as a group, when we've developed this project selection process, we decided, we specifically decided we didn't really want to go with something numerical or weights for different things. We're required federally to consider those federally required the quantitative analysis, the emissions benefits. The rest, that's where that consensus process came in. We thought, let's consider all of this and decide as a group what makes the most sense. So no weights have been applied to this.
Kind of seems pretty fuzzy and qualitative as opposed to quantitative. To me, I'd like to see it more quantitative. And then finally, the eligibility criteria, I assume those are pass, fail. Either they do or they don't. If it doesn't, they're out.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And those are established federal eligibility requirements.
So if it doesn't, for instance, demonstrate benefits or reductions in PM10, it doesn't pass.
Right. It's not eligible.
Okay. Well, just one final comment. So when you bring this back to us, we're going to ask you, how did you come to the conclusion that you came to? And I would hope you'd be able to have a good, clear demonstration of your consensus process about why it was there if you're not going to do it quantitatively.
Fair enough. Makes sense.
Thanks, Alan.
Sid?
So, question I have, so when you're going through the application, process, do you have a scoring formula that you look at?
No.
No quantitative.
No, again, while some of the elements in here will be assessed quantitatively, specifically the quality impacts, as Dan has described, the rest of the consideration by TPC and arriving at a recommendation will be developing a consensus opinion on the projects that have the most benefit.
And this is consensus by?
The Staff Advisory Committee, TPC.
Very good. Okay. So next question then would be that, let's say you bring applications to us, we're really satisfied, we're happy about it, we approve it. Next steps, where are there additional eyes that are then take a look at the applications themselves before final approval? What are those eyes?
So ODOT will, they're actually looking at these projects now. We've been collaborating with them for the last month or so. They've seen these projects. I've received confirmation that they're all eligible projects. We don't have to worry about that. But Federal Highways does have the opportunity to make an ultimate determination on whether a project is eligible or not, and could, in theory, send a project back and say no. Now, they would be basing that on the qualitative analysis. So if a project is eligible, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to give the most bang for the buck, depending on the circumstance or the context of that project. So any of these projects that are eligible, according to the graphic, will provide some benefit to PM10, which is our only requirement for CMAQ eligibility. However, some do more than others, and depending on the context, there may be one project that is just far and away better use of funds than another project. Our priorities may not line up with the quantitative numbers. And I've been told that Federal Highways, although they have the authority to send those projects back and say no, it's rare, and they usually do honor the priorities given to them. But they do have the authority to send something back.
So in other words, someone from Federal Highways who's not exactly sure which one of the 37 Springfields they're looking at could then potentially send it back and say, you know, I don't think this qualifies for Springfield, Ohio. Oh, wait, there's no one. Oh, which Springfield again? So are you saying that that's a possibility?
It actually happens, Commissioner, in the ODOT Division Office of HWA with their local CMAQ person.
I ran into people in Portland and are not sure where Springfield is. So I bring that up sincerely. And so what I want to do is I want to echo what Councilor Zenko had to say here. I'd like to have some sort of priority. I think that would be very important because, as you know, Paul, as you very well know, we got a very sour taste in our mouth going through the Connect process because, frankly, I felt like we had been had. And where we had priorities not only from our local act, the Super Act, but by the time it got into the decision making, you had folks from Salem ODOT deciding, nope, I don't think so, that the priority is going to change and we're going to flip-flop numbers and whatever you decided locally, you don't matter. So I got to tell you, I just want to protect us as much as possible from going through that scenario again. And so I like the idea of some sort of priority if you can. And what we're going to do is rely on you, the staff, to take a look at what your best guess on what is the slam dunk, and then allow us to go through, approve, and actually be prepared to make ultimate comments when the final decisions are made. And I got to tell you, going through that process, I just have some concerns here, and because we're getting some real money to talk about. Thank you to staff. Thank you to Mayor Lundberg. that I'm just happy we're talking about this. And we haven't had this discussion in a while, and so I'm just happy we're here having this discussion and talking about how dollars that have been owed to us for years, we're actually having a chance to talk about right now. So that's my thought, and I'm just going to ask that you do the best you can on that, because I think it helps us. I would agree with Alan. It helps us kind of gauge on, where the priorities are for our MPO, and so that's why I bring this up. And yes, I was being a little bit facetious about Springfield, Ohio, but still the same thing. Just going through that process with Connect, that was pretty, and I was just happy that we weren't the only act that felt that way. As you know, the OTC retreat, about every act in the state presented that same issue, and to the Oregon Transportation Commission, get with the program. And when we actually have priorities here locally that I think we can make decisions on, don't flip-flop them or bang them down to another level where they don't get funded. So that's just my thought.
I appreciate the input from both of you. I believe we will absolutely take that and discuss it with staff this afternoon about coming back with some ranking or tiering or prioritization of the recommendation. And there'll be value in doing that. I do want to add, Dan's been doing an excellent job of vetting these projects, of understanding the process this first time through. As he said, ODOT's already been looking at what started as maybe a 400% list of possible projects and assuring us so far that everything we're looking at as a potential application from your staff is eligible and is extremely unlikely to be kicked back. But we will help you protect against that.
Do the best you can. Thank you.
Pat, did you have something?
Just very briefly, Paul and Desmond, we're the policy body here, and I just wanted to underscore the amount of trust that we place in you to make the right decisions and bring forward ultimately things that we don't have a great deal of time to dig into. That's what you guys do professionally and for a living. And Madam Chair, we, based upon the conversation you just heard from Councilor Zelenka and Commissioner Lycan, we have a great deal of trust. A little bit of numerical information is going to give us, just confirm our trust in you. And the fact, Paul, that you brought me my credit card that I left in the machine downstairs, I know I can trust you.
You haven't seen your bill yet.
Whether your Netflix bill comes in.
That's just Desmond, something that I hope you understand the way Paul does. We put a great deal of trust in you. You've not betrayed the trust, and at this point in time, we're just looking for a little bit of confirmation on that based on what you've heard from the councilor and the commissioner. So thanks.
Alan?
Dan, when you looked at this stuff, and I assume you looked at what the other jurisdictions that have been doing this all along have been doing, do they use quantitative measures, or is it more along the lines of what you guys are proposing?
You mean to determine
what projects get CMAQ funding,
Yeah.
like the Portland and
A lot of them do, but it's not unprecedented to have a process like we're proposing.
I will add to that it varies across the CMAQ areas, and there are hundreds of them around the country, greatly. And I don't want to pick on any one or others, but there are ones that we have seen that are very numerical in their approach. And then I will also point out that Portland Metro takes their CMAQ funds, puts it into their regional program flexible funding arena with other funds, and essentially runs a much more consensus and less data-driven process to determine regional priorities that should get funded, and then decides what type of funding can best match with those projects they already selected. So they're on one end of the spectrum, perhaps, or nearer that end of the spectrum, that does less of a data-driven, quantitative, prioritized system specific to CMAQ.
Just reiterate what Pat and Sid said, which is the more quantification that you can do, the better, and the more prioritization you can do, the better for us.
And I'll just speak on behalf of the fact that sitting at the statewide level meetings, that it's not nearly as clear cut as some of our other funding sources and cycles of applications, that there's a little bit of interpretation about what ought to be eligible, how you might interpret data, et cetera, et cetera. So this would be kind of our first round of trying to figure out how we want it to work for future CMAQ funding also, which we will be part of the next cycles. So it is, I want to say, a little bit subjective about how you go about doing that. So I agree that as much as possible we make as many foolproof decisions or defensible decisions at this point, even though we're the primary ones looking at this funding because we have it, that we still have to get through the end of this bigger process so that we are eligible for the next set of CMAQ funding, the 2.4, whatever we're going to start putting in there. So I think I have great faith that Paul has been just tracking how the numbers work, and Dan, that, you know, that we have everything, because sitting with the other groups, I don't trust that process as much as I trust ours. So I think we are doing the very best job that I've seen at the table so far in terms of making sure that we stay within guidelines and have great projects that we're bringing forward. And I'm thinking that, you know, ones that we can get on the ground as soon as possible too is a great way to look at what we want to do. So other than that, I'm fine with it. So are there any other comments about this application process? Timelines? No? Yeah. You look like you wanted to say something.
Well, it's actually a time check, and we're at the end
we're
of
about
time.
done.
But Brenda, you brought something forward about an OTC appointment. And
Correct, and we still have one other agenda item besides the update.
So that I'd like to hear about the OTC thing before I leave, which is going to be pretty quickly.
We have that, and we do need to talk about the legislative update and something under it for a minute.
Yeah, can we just hit the top, not all 7 of these, but the OTC member and a legislative update, and maybe table everything else on the list? Would that be okay? Okay, so
Tell them.
So do we want to do the OTC so that people can get out?
Sure. Okay, happy to. The Commissioner Lohman on the OTC, the Oregon Transportation Commission, his term is up here shortly. And as you have in the past, we have sent a letter to the governor. We have made recommendations in the past. We are recommending we send a letter to the governor expressing your desire to have a representative on the OTC from this area, and that it is pertinent that we have someone who represents our area on that commission.
Thanks.
Yes.
And just a comment on that. Was it 3 years ago that we submitted Jerry Gatos's name specifically, and there's no name associated with this? Just,
there is no name associated with this.
And that's a prudent way to approach it, do you think? No name? Or?
I think this is the first step.
Okay, all right, I'm fine with that. That's what I wanted to hear.
So we want to strongly express that we would like someone from this area. That would be the gist of this letter.
Yes.
And they have to apply.
And that's the thing, is that we have to have a name that is willing to apply. The application is actually open and available on the governor's website already. So
when does it close? You know?
There is not a closing date. It is up to the governor's determination when she has the applications and can make a selection or a nomination. This is a confirmed position. It does, under the bylaws of the commission, Commissioner Lohman is a Democrat, and his replacement will have to be a Democrat.
Move approval of sending the letter signed by Mayor Lundberg in her capacity as chair of MPC to the governor's office.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so we have a legislative up, and then we have a cable TV, so we are running a little behind.
I can talk about the cable item real quick, just to tell you that I was asked by Ann Davies at LCOG, who is handling the Cable Commission work at this point, to just put this in here so that you could have the information ahead of your June meeting, when she will be here to ask for action.
Okay.
So there's no discussion needed on that.
Okay, and it had 0 minutes listed by it.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, you're over time. Okay, so legislative update.
So the legislative update, if I will,
is Jerry Gates, our Merrick.
Is not as in-depth as I would have hoped, because we had originally thought we would have a bill by the 21st, and then it was last week, and now we're hoping on Monday, next Monday, May 8th, to have an outline of a bill. The Joint Committee has been recessed for several weeks. They are convening Monday evening. This coming Monday, I will be there, and we have been told, though, that we will not have a full bill on Monday. We will have an outline or framework of the package. I'm understanding that they're still quite a ways away from details that are necessary for the bill. However, one of the things that has concerned us is that there's been indications from several sources that instead of having a broad range of ODOT highway congestion, freight mobility projects, as we thought there may be, they may only include those Portland area projects that we've talked about before. And so at your place is a draft of a letter that I put together after having a couple of conversations with the 7 non-Portland MPOs over the past week or so. And all of the MPOs are being asked, the 7 outside of Portland, to give approval to this letter so that I can hopefully submit it Monday night at the Joint Committee. The gist of this letter is asking the Joint Committee and the legislature to include funding mechanisms and projects outside of the Portland area as well as those inside Portland to address the highway needs throughout the state, not just in Portland, in this large package. It's interesting to note that the package started the session as perhaps a same size as last time, if you will. Something on the order of a $3 billion package. If you look at it over 10 years, which is what they're trying to do, is put together a 10-year package. It subsequently grew to a $4.5 billion package, and currently, as of last week or even earlier, we've heard from multiple sources it could be as large as a $7.5 billion package.
Yep.
With that amount of funding on the table, we want projects and improvements throughout the state, not just in Portland. So we're asking for your approval today to be a partner in this letter. And there could be minor editing of it between now and Monday still.
Move approval. Second.
Okay. All those in, any discussion?
That was a strenuous second.
That was. All those in favor?
Don't forget us, Larry.
Say aye.
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 Opposed? There you go.
I wish I could tell you more on the legislative update. I will go out on a limb and promise that we'll do that next month, because we sure should have something by then. We may even send you an email update or two. I'm almost hesitant to do this, but I will tell you one other development on the transportation package is that about 2 weeks ago, the state of Washington reached out and said they wanted to talk about the Columbia River crossing again.
Oh, no.
So that actually has re-entered the discussions.
Okay. All right. I'm sure we'll learn more about that. Okay. So next meeting is at Springfield City Hall Library Meeting Room on June 1st. And if there's nothing else, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you.